Hey friends, welcome back to Fun with the Duns. And today I get to be on it because I am Dusty Dunn and I'm a whole lot of fun. And so I get to be on it today. Okay.
And so is Or.
That's right. Orville is on here today too. All right. So our reading today was in Genesis chapters 14 and 15. And here's what happened. It opens up in chapter 14 with a mighty battle. Now, the battle shouldn't have been a big deal because Abraham, who we've been following about this time, he really didn't live in a city. He lived out in the wilderness. He kind of lived by himself. But sometimes we get swept up in some things because of what the world's going through around us. So here's what happened. This big battle takes place. 5 cities and their kings go to war against 4 cities and their kings. And they go through this big battle, and one side loses, the other side wins. That's how battles work. Well, it wouldn't have been a big deal except for Lot. Remember Abraham's nephew Lot? He got captured by the side that won. And when they captured him, they took him off. They took all of his stuff. They took all of his things. And he was a prisoner. Well, that's when Abraham hears. And Abraham really loved his nephew. And so he said he was going to go to war against these guys. Now, think about the faith of this. Abraham has to go get Lot from 5 kings who just won a whole war. And Abraham has about 300 guys with him, which is no small army, but I mean, he's fighting 5 armies. And so they get together and they go in at night and they whoop those guys. And Abraham gets back Lot and his family and all of his stuff, and he brings them back. And in chapter 14, at the end of that, there's something really neat that happens. Abraham meets a guy named Melchizedek. It's a funny name. That's right. We almost named you Melchizedek.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. We did not.
Jelchizedek.
Okay. Jax Kizedek.
Oh.
Okay. Jax Kisseneck. How about that? Okay.
no.
So, but Melchizedek is he says he's the king of Salem, which means he's the king of peace. That's what Salem means. But it also says he's priest of God Most High. So not only is he a priest of God, he's also the king of peace, which reminds us a whole lot of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so Abraham gives an offering to Melchizedek, which then signifies something special is going on with this guy. In chapter 15, the first thing that happens, it says, and the word of the Lord came to Abraham. I like this because where Melchizedek showed us a picture of what Jesus was going to be like, he's the king of peace and he is our high priest. Jesus is also called in the Bible the Word. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So he meets Melchizedek, and then the first sentence of the next chapter says, and the Word came to Abraham. So God comes to and talks to Abraham, and he tells him that it's almost time for him to receive his promise. He's going to have a baby boy. And Abraham's an old man by this time. And so he's worried about not being able to have babies. And so God promises him, your baby's about, he's coming and I promise to give you one. And God takes animals. God and Abraham, they take animals and they put them to the side. And God does this whole ceremony where he just promises. He says, listen, if I make you a promise, I not only make promises, but I keep my promises. And so we have this whole deal where in chapter 14 and 15, Abraham has to go fight a battle, a worldly battle, but it ends on a high note because he's receiving this kind of holy promise. And so in these 2 chapters, we've got a wonderful thing that says God takes care of us here and he takes care of us there. And so he's always a God who takes care of us. And that's chapters 14 and 15.
All right. Thank you very much, Daddy.
You're welcome very much.
Might I hear your takeaway?
Yes, you might. How about that? Okay, my takeaway comes at the very beginning of chapter 15 where it says, and the Lord came to Abraham in a vision saying, do not be afraid. I love when the Bible tells us not to be afraid. It tells us not to be afraid 365 times in the Bible.
Gosh.
And there's 365 days in the year, which means God tells us, do not be afraid one time in the Bible for every day of the year. My next favorite part is where he says, do not be afraid, Abram, I'm your shield. I love when God tells us he's our shield because a shield is something that stands between us and something that's attacking us.
And we just read a lot about that in Psalms.
Yeah, Psalms was about being a shield all the time. A shield is what stands in between what's trying to attack us and it takes the hits so we don't have to. And then he says this. He says, I am your shield. I am your exceedingly great reward. So listen, the reward is not a baby. The reward is not even the shield. The reward is not even the protection. Abraham is learning in chapter 15 that everything important is all about God. I am your exceedingly great reward. And that's my takeaway.
I like it.
All right, very interesting.
Thank you.
Now, my takeaway is in chapter 15 when God is promising Abram that he's going to have a baby. So, since Abram is very old, it's kind of crazy how he believes God, and that just shows that God keeps his promises because a couple years later, he has Isaac. God also tells him that his people, his descendants, will outnumber the stars, and they will be slaves for about 400 years. Well, sure enough, he has a lot of descendants, the Israelites.
Us. Hey.
Yeah, us. So,
We're not Israelites.
Oh. Well.
Yeah.
well,
And your family's from Asia, so
Okay.
that's completely different.
so anyway, sure enough, his descendants were imprisoned for 400 years, which is crazy, and God told the future and told Abram that's what's going to happen. So I think that shows us that God always keeps his promises, and we can trust him no matter what.
That's good.
Mine go exactly with that, Jax.
Mm.
We're great minds think alike. So I really find it interesting that sometimes God, in giving us instructions to obey, sometimes he gives us very little information, and sometimes he gives us, oh, by the way, this is what's going to happen 400 years from now because of what's going on right now. And I just think that's cool, and he's in charge. It's his prerogative. It's his choice to tell us that information, and I love that. But my very favorite part of this was in chapter 15, verse 6. And God had just told Abraham, you're literally going to have a son. You're going to have an heir. And it seemed impossible. He knew he was old and closer to the end of his life than the beginning. And it said, Abraham believed the Lord. It says, God counted that to him as righteousness. And I think that's beautiful. And I wonder if that's what happens when we believe the Lord, if he counts that to us as righteousness. And so today, for you to discuss as a family, I want y'all to talk about and think about, of all the things we've read so far, or anything you've read in the Bible thus far in your own life, what is your favorite promise of God in the Bible? And not just is that your favorite promise, but do you believe that promise applies to you? And y'all talk about that as a family, and we're excited to do that too. And we'll see y'all next time.
Bye.